Oh, hi everybody, Ezra Levant here. I have a beautiful vista of Alberta behind me. It is a deception. I'm actually in our world headquarters at Toronto, but I wanted to get into the spirit of Western Canada, how beautiful it is. There's so many gorgeous places, Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, so many great national parks, provincial parks, Kananaskis, Canmore, Banff. Love it. Love going into BC. Into Yoho National Park. It's just wonderful. I miss that being out here in Toronto. Today I want to talk about the Liberal case for Wexit. That's the phrase that seems to be catching on for Western Canada exiting. I also saw Rednexit. I'm not sure if that's an insult or if that's redneck pride. Could be either, could be a bit of both. I'm old enough to have at least a child's memory of the first time Western separatism was on the march. It was in the early 80s, right after Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, brought in the National Energy Program that just slaughtered my home province of Alberta, Calgary in particular. I remember being a child and driving into the downtown in my dad's car, and we would play a game, count the construction cranes. It was a game because there were 24. You know those pictures of Dubai just sort of going like just growing out of, that's what Calgary was like in the late 70s and early 80s until Pierre Trudeau came in and smashed it. And so I remember that exhilaration of being a child in Calgary and counting all the cranes and all the bustle. I didn't understand much of it. I was only 8. And then the destruction of it, and I could tell things were wrong in the city, but again, only a child's memory. And then the city came back, the province came back, and here we are again. Now, Pierre Trudeau's son, Justin Trudeau, seeks to destroy Alberta, but at least Pierre Trudeau, he only wanted the money. Like, he didn't want to stop the drilling for oil and gas. He just wanted it. He nationalized Petro-Canada. He brought in a petroleum and gas revenue tax, not to stop oil production, but just to steal the money for Quebec. He was at least an honest thief. You got to respect that. But Justin Trudeau wants to smash it to stop it. He thinks oil is bad or something. He wants to phase it out. So it has a different character to it, this attack on Alberta and the oil patch this time. And it's not just Justin Trudeau. It's Jagmeet Singh of the NDP. It's Elizabeth May of the Green Party. It's what's his name, the head of the bloc. And what's different about this last election is how explicit it was. When Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister from Calgary, didn't have many seats in Quebec. He never demonized Quebec. He never ran against Quebec. He never used Quebec as a punching bag or the punchline of a joke. In fact, it was a little bit irritating to see how far he would go the other way. He would always answer questions at a press conference first, en français. He would always start his speech first, en français, even if he was giving the speech in Calgary. He never fought with Quebecers. Frankly, he gave them everything they wanted. That's why the Parti Québécois and the Bloc Québécois receded under his watch. He just never fought with them, which is what they wanted. And he gave them so much that there was really no legitimate quarrel. A cowboy, that's what they called them, from Calgary solved the national unity crisis simply by not inflaming it. He never ran against Quebec. He didn't need to. Why would he do that? That would of being un-Canadian and contrary to his own character. But here we have an election campaign where all the major parties of the left, the Liberals, the NDP, the Green, and the Bloc, every one of them ran with Alberta and the oil patch in particular as the whipping boy, as the punchline, as the target. In fact, on election night, the Bloc Québécois emphasized its hatred for oil pipelines, but of course it's lying. Quebec is the second largest user of oil in Canada. They bring it in by train from the United States. That's how Lac Mégantic happened. And they bring it in by tanker from Saudi Arabia and other OPEC countries. So they're lying when they say they don't like oil. You don't think they're using jet fuel at Pierre Trudeau International Airport. You don't think the 5 million, 7 million, however many million cars in Quebec run on gasoline. Their trucks rely on diesel. Of course they do. They just hate Alberta. And I'm not saying all Quebecers, and I'm not even saying all Liberals, but enough that that's the cool thing to say and do, and enough that that's politically rewarding. You wouldn't have all of those parties to the left attacking Alberta if it wasn't politically rewarding. None of them are particularly principled. They all just want votes. And so in the last couple of days, Albertans sort of woke up and said, oh, I guess they really do hate us. Do we have those clips that I used the other day, of the 2 clips of Trudeau? Let me just remind our viewers of what Trudeau says about us on purpose, voluntarily. The first one was from 1999. So around the time, just before he was fired from West Point Grey Academy for whatever reason, just before he groped that female reporter in Creston, BC. So he was interviewed, and he looked pretty young, and I mean, he was only 27 or 28, so, you know, of course he's very infantile and juvenile, so, but he's still, let me know when we got that clip. It's the first one, where he says, of course, Quebecers are better. And he wouldn't have come up with that on his own. That obviously is something he learned from his father, who obviously believed that too. We're just digging up the clip. I surprised our producer by a request for it, so he's digging for it. And I'll show the second one that he recorded 10 years later. I can't recall if he was already an MP then. Anyhow, we'll come back to those. It's not the core of my conversation today, and those who watch the show have seen it before. What I want to do today is I want to make the case for Western separatism or Western independence from the point of view of the Liberal Party. Justin, can you grab David Menzies' Streeters that we just published? Let me just show, let's run 1 minute of David Menzies' interviews on the streets of Toronto, where he put some questions. I had talked to him about these questions. Albertans want to go because they want respect. They don't want to be bullied anymore. They don't want to be abused anymore. And most importantly, they don't want to be turned into Detroit. Once the economic engine of America, the highest industrial wage in America, Motor City, Factory City, now it's decrepit, dilapidated, abandoned, broken. Politics did that. Americans still drive cars. They just don't usually buy them from Detroit these days. That's all politics. Let's just quickly, I hear in my ear that we've got the Trudeau clips, then I'll get to the Streeters. So here's Justin Trudeau when he was 27 or 28. Take a look. They're gone? Okay, we'll get them back. Yeah, so why would Albertans want to go? Well, they're sick of losing. They're sick of being shut out. They're sick of being abused. And most importantly, they're genuinely worried about their economic future. The oil patch in Texas is booming, by the way. The oil patch just across the border in the Bakken geological region in North Dakota is booming. The world oil prices are fine. American oil production has never been higher. It's Canadian politics that have stopped it. Okay, quickly, here's Justin Trudeau when he was 27 or 28.
Quebecers are better than the rest of Canada because, you know, we're Quebecers.
Yeah, I mean, so he said that when he was 27, not a child. 10 years later, here's what he said about Quebecers, Stephen Harper, others. Take a look.
Regardez, le Canada fait dur maintenant parce que c'est des Albertains qui contrôlent notre agenda communautaire et socio-démocratique. Ça marche pas.
Est-ce que le Canada est mieux servi quand il y a plus de Québécois au pouvoir que quand il y a plus d'Albertains au pouvoir?
Ben, je suis libéral, alors c'est sûr que je pense que oui. Certainement, quand on regarde les grands premiers ministres du 20e siècle, les seuls qui ont vraiment tenu le coup, c'était des députés du Québec. C'était Trudeau, c'était Mulroney, c'était Chrétien, c'était Paul Martin. Alors, on a un rôle, ce pays, le Canada, est à nous.
Yeah, hey, Alberta, you belong to Trudeau and his Quebec buddies. I think it's the perfect juxtaposition that the day after the election, SNC Lavalin, that corrupt criminal corporation, their stock market price rose 15%, about $400 million market cap. And on the same day, Husky Oil in Calgary laid off hundreds and hundreds of staff. Yeah, I mean, you heard the man. Canada belongs to Quebec. You belong to Quebec. I see a Proud Boy super chat there. Was watching Rebel on Monday with my chapter. All of us joined Wexit before your broadcast ended. We got the message that the East doesn't want us. Thanks for that note, and thanks for the super chat. I want to show you David Menzies' street. It's like a 10-minute video, but I'm going to show you 1 minute and then come back. Here, take a quick look.
NDP should have won.
Oh, is that right?
Why do you say that, man?
Jagmeet Singh, bro. Like, what do you mean?
He was gonna stop the pipeline.
Yeah.
That's all we want.
I heard NDP was doing good for the people, you know?
Okay, then.
I heard it was an NDP thing right now, but to be honest,
Actually, it was the Liberals got a minority government last night. Sorry.
it's the Liberals that got the government, but I was voting for the NDPs.
Like, even though I felt like NDP, like Jagmeet was like the best choice, especially for young people in Canada. I felt.
Why do you say that, by the way?
I was just really happy with his concern for the environment, concern with our school, like our tuition, and like the well-being of Canadians.
I voted green.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Do you have any
skip ahead to
thoughts?
where he
Your
asks
friend
about
was
the
saying
carbon and
Jagmeet
stuff.
saying number one.
Yeah, number one, bro. Yo, he's coming back 2020.
Situation, Alberta can go off and do their own thing, develop their pipelines, and Canada overnight would meet all its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So what do you think about that?
I think it's not fully curing the problem of the land itself being affected. We do need to think about our Earth, especially when we're looking at videos saying that we have 11 years before we have, like by 2030, before we have irreversible damage.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Alberta still. I agree with Alberta. Even though it's a big question, I have to overthink it again, but I have to still agree with Alberta because they're all this about gas and stuff over there, right? The pipelines and the oil and stuff like that, right? So
That's right.
they kind of.
Trudeau's committed to, being a climate crusader, so we'd have a big win that way, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we would have a big win that way.
What if we allow Quebec and Alberta to leave? We get rid of maybe two headaches at the same time.
Getting rid of two headaches is good, but if Alberta doesn't leave, still, one's better than two. At least something is better than nothing. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't it be in Trudeau's best interest?
All right, pretty incoherent, which is what you expect from folks at Yonge and Dundas. Sorry, no disrespect. Well, maybe a little bit of disrespect. But David asked some questions, and let me put them to you. I've told you why Albertans are mad. They were morally abused by all the parties. They were the punching bag of all the parties. That doesn't feel good. They ship $14 billion a year more to Ottawa than they get back from Ottawa, equalization. Most of that goes to Quebec, which hates them the most. That's oil money, of course, so the rank hypocrisy of Quebec saying no pipelines, but they'll take their Saudi oil tankers and their American oil by rail. That irritates. But I think it's mainly worry that they'll be turned into the Detroit of Canada, this once mighty industrial base. Earlier this year, for the first time in a decade, Alberta oil production declined. How is that even possible? America has added 50% to their production in the last 5 years. How is Canada's declining? We have 200 billion barrels of oil under the ground. How can our production be declining? Well, because of Trudeau and Rachel Notley. Notley's gone, but Trudeau and Quebec and BC are still corking it in. So that's the Alberta case. Albertans just don't want to be poor and unemployed. You can't blame them. Whether that's an independent country and still part of the British Commonwealth, or if it joins the United States, either as a state or an independent territory like Guam or American Samoa, or maybe if it joins as a full-blown state, the Democrats would probably want Puerto Rico to balance off the Democrat state, the Republican state, whatever. That's the Alberta side of things. But what about the Liberal side of things, the Toronto side of things? The clips we showed you from David Menzies' Vox Pop didn't quite do the job, but let me put it to you this way. Let's say you're Justin Trudeau. What did he win? 156 seats Was that how it all ended on Monday night? So you have 338 seats in Parliament, and he won 156. That's a minority. But you take out Alberta's 34 seats. Liberals didn't. You're not taking a single Liberal seat away, but you're taking away 33 Tories and a New Democrat. So you shrink Parliament from 338 seats down to 304 seats. Guess what? Justin Trudeau just won a majority government. And if Saskatchewan leaves too, well, that's even more. I mean, you will have Liberal governments for the end of time. It would be like if you took Texas out of the United States. The Democrats would win every single election forever. So, is it in Justin Trudeau's interest to see Alberta leave? Well, in terms of winning the next election, it most certainly is. How about a question that Menzies put to some of the streeters there? What about the carbon dioxide emissions? Canada emits just under 750 megatons of CO2 a year. It's what? Not even 2% of the world's man-made emissions. It's nothing. It's a rounding error. China adds that much more every few months. Canada's irrelevant. But Justin Trudeau, Catherine McKenna, Gerald Butts, they're obsessed with meeting our UN climate targets. By the way, you can't do that if you're bringing in 350,000 new migrants a year, each of whom wants a house and a car. You'll never do it. Unless you get rid of Alberta. Because of those 750 megatons a year of CO2, about a third are from Alberta. The oil sands emits carbon dioxide. It's an energy-intensive business. So you would immediately be the hero of the global warming jet set. Now, of course, it's a ridiculous accounting trick. The oil sands would still be operating. In fact, they would be operating more than ever because they wouldn't have Ottawa meddling. But you could say, no, that's not ours. Just like when we buy stuff from China and we're basically outsourcing the carbon dioxide to China, we can pretend it's not ours. That's exactly the kind of Enron accounting that global warming's politics are based on. So if you say goodbye to Alberta, I'm speaking from the point of view of a Toronto Liberal, Ottawa Liberal, Montreal Liberal, you say goodbye to 33 or 34 Conservative MPs, and those ridings are always going to go Conservative plus or minus a few. So it's like the Democrats saying goodbye to Texas, or goodbye to Utah, or goodbye to West Virginia. They're happy to get rid of those votes. From a global warming point of view, ta-da, we did it. And where do all the conservative ideas in Canada come from? A lot of them come from Alberta. It was Ralph Klein who was the template for Mike Harris. It was. Who are amongst the loudest advocates against gun control. Albertans and Saskatchewan people too. Where are the conservative ideas? Well, where did Stephen Harper come from? Alberta. Where did Stockwell Day come from? Alberta. He then moved to BC, but he was an Alberta boy for first 50 years of his life. All of a sudden, there's just no more. Where were the noisiest opponents to forced bilingualism? Alberta. Where were the noisiest opponents to the wheat board? Alberta. So if you are a Liberal, and Liberals care about power, government power, why wouldn't you want to say goodbye to Alberta? Oh, I know the answer. It's obvious. It's what I said at the very beginning. It's the $14 billion a year in equalization payments and other payments that Ottawa gets more than it gives to Alberta. But that's a rounding error in the whole scheme of things. I mean, what's the Canadian GDP? Without Googling it, I don't want to guess wrong. I think the Canadian GDP is $2 trillion. Am I right on that, Justin? Can you Google that for me? I think Canada's GDP is around $2 trillion. That's 2,000 billion, right? So if you're giving up 15 billion in equalization. That's not even 1%. Like, it really is a rounding error. What do you, yeah, thank you. That's US dollars. So yeah, that's, you put that in Canadian, that's $2 trillion. Thanks for Googling that. Yeah, so 1.65 trillion US dollars. That's almost, let's call that 2.2, I forget the math. That's 2 trillion Canadian. Thanks. So yeah, oh, but we're going to give up all this oil money in Ottawa. Yeah, it's a rounding error, 1%. And you really think Trudeau cares about money? I mean, he racks up deficits. He drops, in a tweet, he dropped $50 million to Trevor Noah of The Late Show or whatever. He goes to Africa and he hands out billions like he's some black-faced Santa Claus or something. So yeah, I mean, the reason Albertans would want to go, besides the respect, is so they're not all put on unemployment and being shut down. So those are financial reasons in addition to moral reasons and sovereignty reasons and self-respect reasons and all the soft reasons. But the hard reason is they don't want to be out of a job. Those would be a reason why a normal, rational Prime Minister would want to keep Alberta in. I mean, for God's sakes, they've got 200 billion barrels of proven reserves. But believe Trudeau and believe Gerald Butts when they say they want to phase out the oil sands. I say again, when Pierre Trudeau came for the oil money, like all good communists, and Pierre Trudeau was, at least early in his career, a Marxist by his own confession. Communists, if you look at their iconography, if you look at their propaganda photos, posters, there's always a factory, and in fact it's belching smoke. That's the proof it's working. I mean, look at the symbol of communism. It's the hammer and the sickle, tools of work, of heavy industry, not of, it's not the service industry, that's the heavy industry. Factories, I mean, think of the great Soviet experiments, the great Maoist experiments, a steel brazier, like a brazier in the back of everyone's house in China to make steel. Magnitogorsk, all these industrial grand 5-year plans in the Soviet Union. The communists believed in industry. They just wanted it to be owned by the proletariat. Pierre Trudeau believed in oil and gas. He just wanted to steal the money, but he wanted it to be produced. Justin Trudeau and Gerald Butts don't believe in the factories. They shut down a perfectly good coal-fired power plant at Nanticoke, one of the most impressive power plants in North America, because it emitted carbon dioxide. I mean, how many billions did that cost? They don't actually care about industry. They all say they want to phase out the oil sands. Why don't we believe them? So they're happy to see it go. So that, my friends, is the liberal case for Wexit. Get rid of 34 Conservative MPs, maybe another dozen or whatever, what's it, 14 seats in Saskatchewan, I forget the exact number. Get rid of all those Tory votes, win the federal election forever, as the Democrats would do if Texas were to leave. Immediately get your climate targets, win the Nobel Peace Prize for environmental climate targetism or whatever. Be rid of all those pesky conservatives and their retrograde ideas. And, I think I missed a super chat there. Yeah, what's not to like if you're a liberal? I mean, sure, there's the emotional sentimentality, but do you really think that tens of thousands of liberals would fly from Toronto to Calgary to say, "We love you, Calgary, stay with us," as they all did in 1995 when Quebec was on the knife's edge in their separatism referendum? No, because they don't love Alberta. They've certainly never been to Alberta. They don't respect Alberta. I mean, they just don't. I'm not saying everyone, but the momentum, the political momentum in Canada, you saw it yourself, is anti-Alberta. Super chat from Dame of the Dammits. Do you, the recession will be worse than 1980? I don't know. I thought we would be in a recession by now, in part because of Trump's Buy America plans. I don't know. I think Statistics Canada was juicing the numbers, frankly. I think they've become very politicized under Justin Trudeau. I think we may be worse off already than is that on. So I've told you why Liberals would want to get rid of Alberta. Mainly because it'll make it easier for them to win. And they don't really care about the oil. They want it shut down anyways. But why would Conservatives want Alberta to stay? Well, for exactly the inverse reasons. Andrew Scheer would want Alberta to stay because with Alberta, Andrew Scheer has no hope of winning. He needs those 34 seats as his absolute rock-solid base. Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, obviously if he was the Premier from Alberta and Alberta is no longer part of Canada, he couldn't be Prime Minister of Canada. And even in the course of the next few years, if he even hints that he's sympathetic to separatism and independence in any way, that will be hung around his neck when he does run for federal leader. Jason Kenney absolutely has national ambitions. It's fairly evident. I have no secret information on that. He's bilingual. He's spent as much time in Ontario in his life as he has in Alberta. He knows the circuit of the ethnic communities better than anyone else in Conservative politics. He was deployed late in the game in Andrew Scheer's campaign, and he was much more rapturously received than Scheer himself. Yeah, Jason Kenney wants to be Prime Minister. He's perfectly bilingual, very bilingual. That doesn't go if Alberta leaves. So you have an irony in that the Liberals would do better if Alberta was gone and the Conservatives would do more poorly. But I don't know if it will happen because in some places like Czechoslovakia, the separation is quick, neat, tidy, everyone's happier, the divorce is done. Quebec separatists deliberately wanted to make the negotiations and the threats as painful as possible because they actually didn't want to go. They wanted the argy-bargy back and forth so they could extract concessions. I see a super chat. I have a bad feeling Jason Kenney won't let Wexit pass. Isn't he a Federalist? I guess we'll see what he says tonight. From Darren Turcott. Oh, absolutely, he'll come out against it. Oh, he's going to study it. He'll have panels studying the issue. I'm pretty sure it's been studied, and I'm pretty sure we know the problem. Studying is a way of saying, I don't know what to do, or I want to bury things in bureaucraties. Quebec separatism wasn't for real, because Quebecers knew they were being subsidized enormously by the rest of Canada, and they also knew they were getting so many benefits from the eternal quarrel. 3 seats out of 9 on the Supreme Court, overrepresentation in the House of Commons, forced bilingualism coast to coast, forced affirmative action in national institutions like the military and the RCMP. Just examples. They didn't want to go. They were not actually abused morally in Canada, not at all. Not certainly by the Stephen Harpers of the world. But I think you would see the same sabotage of Wexit, red Nexit, as you see in Brexit. In Brexit, it was the deplorables who voted to leave, 17.4 million of them. It shocked the establishment, the banks, the media, the political elites, who have now spent 3.5 years trying to undermine it, and it looks like they might actually win through all sorts of pettifoggery and skullduggery. Remember that most of the media in Alberta is owned in Toronto. Calgary Sun, Calgary Herald, Edmonton Sun, Edmonton Journal, CTV, CBC, Global, all the radio, Chorus Radio, most of the radio, all the online sites, Vice, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, so they're either Toronto-based or American-based, they would all be against any form of Alberta independence, whether it's sovereignty association, its own little country, some sort of association with the United States, a territory, state, whatever. They would all be against it, just like they are against Brexit. Everyone's against it but the people. So it'll be a bloody road ahead, and I don't know how it'll go. But I do know one thing. it will be treated differently than Quebec separatism is. The respect that the Bloc Québécois and the Parti Québécois get from the establishment, from the media, is incredible because they're sympathetic, they're sympathizers. In fact, Radio-Canada, that's the French version of the CBC, is practically separatist. You'll see the opposite if Alberta's Wexit, Rednexit, gets any momentum. They already call Alberta bigoted, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, everythingophobic. They'll just ratchet that up. It won't be, please, can we win you back? It'll be, we hate you and we'll demonize you even more. That's what I think is going to happen. I mean, if you were a Liberal, you would want Alberta gone because you would win the federal election every single time, just like a Democrat would want Texas gone. If you're a Liberal, you're probably economically stupid, so you don't care about the money. You just want the virtue signaling of saying goodbye to the oil and gas industry. You'll buy your oil from America in Saudi Arabia and pretend you're not. I think there is a Liberal case for Wexit. It'll be interesting to see what happens. All right, folks, I'm going to take super chats for 10 minutes and then I'm going to go. I got to get back to work. I just felt like sharing some of these thoughts. I've been meandering on some of them, musing on some of them, talked to David Menzies a bit about some of them. Darren Turcott says, I have a bad feeling Jason Kenney won't let Wexit pass. Okay, I mentioned that one already. Malcolm Wilhelm, what legal issues prevent Alberta separatism? Well, it's interesting you say that because Quebec's already litigated that. The Clarity Act and the Supreme Court reference around Quebec separatism, now more than 20 years ago, is exactly about how do you separate. Unlike the United States, where it's illegal to separate, in fact, they fought their Civil War over that in the main. In fact, Abraham Lincoln said, I don't want to misquote him, Abe Lincoln letter, slaves, I think it was to the New York Times. Yeah, here it is. Let me quote this. He wrote this to the New York Tribune. This is Abraham Lincoln. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do it. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union. And what I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union. I shall do less whenever I shall believe what I'm doing hurts the cause. I shall do more whenever I shall believe doing more will help the cause. I shall try to correct the errors when shown to be errors. I shall adopt new views so fast as they shall appear to be true views. And my point is that the reason Abraham Lincoln fought the Civil War was to stop the South from leaving, not to free the slaves. I just quoted to you his letter to the New York Tribune. That's not how it is in Canada. In Canada, separatism is not just legal. There is a prescribed process as set out in a law called the Clarity Act and as further clarified and proceduralized by the Supreme Court of Canada. Western separatism, Alberta separatism, separatism of any sort is lawful in Canada. It is proceduralized in Canada, and the courts have already approved it. It's not like what Abe Lincoln said. Let me take a few more questions or comments, and then I'm going to sign off because I have other work to do. Brandon Wells, Scheer resign. Yeah, I think he had a bad election. I think a better leader could have won at least a minority. I think that's pretty obvious, I think. Super chat from the Berminator. Who should replace Scheer? Bring back Harper? Harper would not have done as poorly, but I don't think Harper wants to come back in. That I just don't think that's realistic. Joe Schmo, revolution. No, that's the point, is that in typical Canadian fashion, no revolution necessary. It's very lawful. Peace, order, and good government. Just follow the law, follow the Clarity Act. Christoph Ladd, is this American news? Well, I don't know. I tweeted Donald Trump tweeted a tweet congratulating Justin Trudeau. I said, hey, Mr. President, you tried to buy Greenland. They said no. I bet Alberta would say yes. And what American wouldn't want 200 billion barrels of oil? That's the reserves. Alberta, Venezuela, and Saskatchewan need to leave. You know, when I published a magazine called The Western Standard, we had a columnist named Rick Dolphin who talked about Albumbia. That was his fun name for Alberta and the interior of British Columbia. All right, I'm almost done. Give me a few more questions or super chats because I'm going to wrap up pretty quick. Frustrated Canadian, Ezra, SNC stocks, talk about it, please help people see the truth. I did talk about it. I haven't looked at them today, but yesterday the stock rose 15% because they know their crook was reelected. Robert Vaughn, PPC didn't even register. You're right. I'm not sure the reason for that. I think it was strategic voting. If you were in a riding where it was close, you voted for Conservatives. Just the same way Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, they certainly look good in the polls, but I think at the last minute, New Democrats voted for Trudeau. Irina Emelianov, Pierre Poilievre for CPC leader. I think he's a good choice. He's young, he's energetic, he's conservative, he's bilingual, I think he's bilingual. He's right near Ottawa, which is convenient for a lot of things. Could be, yeah, for sure he's a contender. Jeff Clark, I'm moving to Alberta if they separate. Thomas Riccati, if Alberta and Quebec both secede, it would cancel out electorally. Yeah, then you don't have much of a country left, do you? I mean, would BC really stick around? Would the other prairies? Maybe. Mike, the oil emirate of Alberta. That's funny, but it is true. Alberta has more oil than any OPEC country except Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. It's Venezuela number 1, Saudi Arabia number 2, Alberta number 3. Will Velour, if Alberta went, Manitoba and Saskatchewan would go too. I don't know so much about Alberta. I think Saskatchewan would. Malachi King, Alberta strong. We will be a nation unto ourselves. Never will we join as a state of the U.S. There you go. I mean, that's certainly a debate. But one thing's for sure is having strong economic access to the United States and vice versa would be critical. And of course, America would want that Canadian oil, Alberta oil. The Lane Splitter MC, Ezra, don't forget Saskatchewan. Oh, I don't. And I think that Scott Moe has shown he's out of patience too. But Scott Moe had a great statement yesterday about he wants to scrap the carbon tax, he wants to review equalization. So basically, the same list of demands that he had 2 days ago. And I responded by tweet. I said, okay, or what? What's the or else? You need an or else there. Henry Walker, congratulations on winning a court. Hail victory. You're speaking, I presume, of our federal court challenge against the censorship ban from Trudeau. If so, I thank you. Two Big Eyes says Tex Alta. Well, you know, there's a lot of Texans and Oklahomans in Alberta. You know, when I was in law school, we studied oil and gas law, and most of the cases were Oklahoma or Texas oil companies that were discovering the law, all the cases. It wasn't Ontario and Quebec money that developed Alberta's oil patch. It was American money. And at least when I was growing up as a kid, 50,000 Texans, they said, lived in Calgary. So it's got a bit of an American vibe to it if you've ever been there. Edmonton's a bit different. Lone Ronan, Albertans don't want BC involved with our Wexit. They're part of the problems Alberta has. Well, there's at least two different parts of BC, isn't there? There's the interior, which is really like Alberta. There's the lower mainland, which is like Seattle. And then there's Vancouver Island, which is pretty hippie. Although there's some sort of, prepper compound style Albertans retiring there, I think. Yukon also says Caden Fraser. Yeah, it could be. Look, I don't know what would happen, but I know one thing is Alberta isn't just taken for granted by the rest of the country. It is abused by the rest of the country. As I said to, I think it was David Menzies earlier today, I've never seen Albertans particularly angry about sending equalization payments down to Quebec. The anger I've seen is sending the oil money equalization to Quebec and then being attacked for being in the oil business. You can't really take the profits of oil and then smear oil, claim you're against oil, but then take OPEC and American oil. That's the crazy thing, is OPEC is not subject to Trudeau's carbon tax. American oil imports are not subject to Trudeau's carbon tax. He's literally taxing Canadian oil to a disadvantage of foreign oil. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up. I just wanted to share some thoughts with you because they were on my mind. I spoke at some length with David Menzies about this, and you could, of course, see his speeders on the streets of Toronto. Plus, I wanted to use that gorgeous image. I think that's either Lake Louise or Lake Moraine behind me. Very nice. Okay, folks, I'm going to sign off now. I just felt like scratching that itch until tonight at 8 p.m. where I do my show on a completely different subject. I'm taking a break from politics tonight, and I talk about a crazy case of someone trying to ban a word. I'm not going to tell you what word, but there is a bill. There's a bill in front of a legislature to ban only one word, by the way. I wonder if you can guess what the word is. I'll tell you that answer at 8 p.m. tonight. All right, folks, until then, I'll see you later, and hey, you, keep fighting for freedom.